Is anger messing up your family? Do you struggle with anger management? And is that something you say, hey, you know what? I really need to do something about it? Well, don't go anywhere. That's what we're going to be talking about today in our live talk, Family Talk Live with the Dukas. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back to another Family Talk Live with the Dukies. We are here once again. I know we've been missing for a while. We've
Couple of
been
weeks.
traveling and being involved in so many different things and projects that we haven't been able to connect with you. But today we are back with, I'd say we haven't talked about this or we haven't really discussed this topic before,
No.
anger and how it affects the family, how it affects our marriages and our overall family
Mm.
life. So, for those who are just joining us for the first time, I am Sanya Duki, mental health therapist and Christian parenting coach. And
I am Courtney Duki, registered psychologist in the province of Alberta.
we are the founders of Duki's Institute, an organization dedicated to empowering and enriching Christian family life. And through that, our aim is to help families restore their family altar, restore their marriage, and also transform their
Mhm.
parenting in God's way. All right. So I've heard this question being, I'd say, maybe not a question, but more of a reaching out to say, my spouse is struggling with so much anger and
Mhm.
it gets to me. I
Yes.
don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah, and as you said, it's a common theme because sometimes if you are in a relationship, so when they talk about marriages ending after that 7 years mark, we're gonna have that 7 years of working through things, and oftentimes if we're not dealing with the fundamental things, you have resentment being
Yeah.
boiled up. We've talked about resentment before. We've talked about unforgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Of all these things boiling up, and they're inside of us, and they're literally eating away.
Yes.
Actually, so when I say literally, it's literally eating away at us, and that kind of fester that emotion of anger, or produce that emotion of anger in us, and sometimes we keep it down,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes it keep coming up in the
Yeah.
relationship where we snap at each other, and we have these um, unloading
Mm-hmm.
of our internal experiences on the other person. And sometimes it's an everyday thing. It depends on where the relationship is.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just can't even look at each other. Sometimes we don't even talk to each other. We stop communicating. We stop talk altogether.
Yeah.
We have shutting down. We have
Yeah.
withdrawal. We have stonewalling. We have all these things that happen
Mm-hmm.
because of anger. Because anger tend to once anger start to manifest itself like that, where we're hurting each other.
Yes.
So something happened and we experience the anger. We never deal with the thing that happened, and now we get angry at the person. The other person get angry at us,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not dealing with that emotion either. So now we're adding.
Yeah.
So anger is like compound
Yes.
negative interest, if we can create a term for it, is a compound negative interest in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's building, it's building,
Yeah.
it's building. Because we haven't dealt with the first thing. But
Yes. And I think what I'd also add, since we're talking about where anger come from or what usually causes anger in relationship, sometimes it's just an emotion that we haven't really learned to deal
deal
with.
with.
Yeah, growing up, that's always been a thing. Whenever I'm upset, this is how I express myself.
So,
And we get into the relationship, and it's the same thing. Our spouse has to be dealing with that, and our children are impacted by that as well. So, those are two factors we're looking into. So today we want to talk about what we need to do, what it is that we need to do. If I am the one who's struggling with the anger issues, what are the things, the steps that I can take today in order to move forward and work through this? Or if my spouse is the one who usually is angry, what do I do about it? How do I cope with that? What do we do about it in our relationship?
Well, when you think about the relationship, and for those who are watching, please, if you have questions or comments, please let us know. We
Yes.
will respond to your specific questions or comment. So, first of all, if I'm the one struggling with it,
Mhm.
I need to find help. Fundamentally, I need to find help, right? Sometimes and finding help could be either you take a course in anger management
Mhm.
or you seek therapy to deal with anger management, right? But let me say this first. Nothing is wrong
Mhm.
with the emotion of anger. So let's take that out of the picture
Yeah.
right away.
I'm happy you say that, because I know, like, we grew up feeling like, it's terrible.
Yeah.
We should never have it.
No, it's an okay emotion. So the emotion. So I think we've mentioned this for other emotions that we've talked about on our show, is that emotions are messengers.
Yeah.
They give us messages, right? And what we do with the message is where we either do the right thing with the message or the wrong thing with the message. So if I'm experiencing the emotion of anger in my relationship, it means that either there's something external to the relationship going on,
Mhm.
where I'm angry about something and then I'm expressing that within my family.
Mhm.
Or it could be something going on inside the family
Yeah.
that is triggering the emotion of anger, and then I retaliate or express the emotion in the
Yes.
family. So it could be an external factor
Mhm.
that I'm not dealing with, but it's causing me to be angry,
Yeah.
and my family feel the wrath
Yes.
of that anger. Or it could just be something in the relationship, right?
Mhm.
So the Bible says this, and I love this verse where it says, "Be angry." It said, "Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath." So be angry, but do not sin. So in other words, the Bible is not saying that anger is bad.
Mhm.
It says that when we feel the emotion of anger,
Yeah.
if we replace the word sin with ill behaviors
Mhm.
or bad behaviors,
Yeah.
and we read it in that context, and it says, "Be angry, but do not behave badly."
Mhm.
So basically, that's what the Bible is saying. The Bible says you can be angry, but choose how you behave.
Yeah.
Again, that itself is difficult, because anger triggers certain neurological system
Mhm.
that cause a person not to think. So therefore, the person to start to learn about these things. So we'll come back to that. Put a point there. So that's if I am dealing with it.
Mhm.
The other question is, what if my spouse is the one struggling
Yes.
with anger?
I need help.
What do we do with that? Well,
Yeah.
the thing is that one of the first things I coach people on in relationship work is, you can never fight fire
Mhm.
with fire. Right? You can't. If the person is angry, it doesn't make sense to keep pushing. Right? You want to take a step back. If a spouse struggles with anger, you want to take a step back. And when they're in a calmer space,
Mhm.
you want to sit down with them and say to them, today, when this thing happened,
Mhm.
and I noticed there were some frustration. Notice I never say your frustration. I noticed there was some frustration. Notice there was some anger.
Mhm.
And the way how that was expressed towards me,
Yeah.
I felt hurt and I felt frustrated. I am wondering what we can do so as to address this challenge the next time it shows up.
Mhm.
And this is where the other person now is becoming aware of at least one thing here, that the way their expression of their emotion, of that anger, is causing a problem.
Yeah.
So you're covertly revealing to that person that there is a problem, and how that problem is affecting you. So notice in this, I'm not telling the person to go and fix their anger problem in the first instance. I'm expressing to them how the expression of the emotion of anger, how is affecting me,
Mhm.
how is it affecting the children.
Yeah.
We feel this way, we get scared, we don't know what to do. So oftentimes you want to start there. That's a starting point.
Mhm.
If that doesn't change it, then eventually you might have to come to a place where you say to the person, you know what? If something that the person have been dealing with for years and they're
Yeah.
struggling with it, you want to say, hey, we need to go get some help with this.
Mhm.
And notice I say we, and I use the word we, not you need to go get some help with this. Because you may think, you know what, this is his problem or her problem. That's not my problem. I don't need to go with it. But if the person is aware that there is support,
Mhm.
sometimes makes it easier to say, you know, and they may say, oh, no, I will go and do it. And if they want to do that, that's okay. But if you say we, and if you say we, you know, I'm in this with you, this is something affecting our relationship. It's not I am the one struggling with the anger, but the fact that you are struggling with it, it becomes a we problem.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you go in and you learn some skills, and we support each other in doing that. So that's strategies we can use of both
Mhm.
direction. There's much more we can think about in terms of how we start and deal with different things, how we start a conversation, and all those pieces
Yeah.
into this.
In fact, we do have a step-by-step guide. We recently prepared that, and a lot of individuals have reached out to say, hey, yes, they want a copy. So we have issued a lot of copies to people, and it's a step-by-step guide on how to communicate in a healthy way and to resolve conflict or get into conversations
Sure.
without it ending up in a fight. So if you would like a copy of that, just comment below and let me know. Just say, hey, I'd like a copy, and I'll contact you and get a copy to you right away. All right? So there are resources out there to help you with that.
And one of the things that we talk about, I think in that same copy is sending out there, oftentimes if you struggle with anger, your first thing is to learn some self-control.
Yes.
Self-control doesn't come when you're in the midst of the anger.
Right.
It comes when you feel the trigger of the anger.
Mm-hmm. So how do we feel the trigger, Dr. Dookie?
Well, you will feel, most of us will feel the trigger. If you think about it, your heart rate increase. There's an increased palpitation. Some people get sweaty. Some people, they start to feel kind of hives on their skin, so they feel hot. Yeah. So these are things that you use your physiological thing indicators to check into yourself, right?
Yeah.
And this is what the Bible says again. I love our scripture says, whoever is slow to anger. Mm-hmm. To be slow to anger, and this is taken from Proverbs 16:32. It says, whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty. Mm-hmm. Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty.
So we're more impactful.
We're more impactful if we're slow to anger. Slow to anger means that I'm going to get to know myself. Yes. And I can feel my heart rate increase. I can feel my physiological sensation. Now I breathe and slow myself down. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So slow to anger means I am tuning in to myself. Yeah. And as I tune in, I'm regulating myself. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. And the simple way of saying that when we do get into anger, mm-hmm. we get into survival mode.
Yes.
And when we're in survival mode, that's the downstairs part of our brain that's being activated. We're either in fight mode. Mm-hmm. Usually that comes off in the anger.
Yes.
Fight mode. When we're in fight mode, that's when we recognize that we are more angry. We also have the flight mode and we have the freeze mode. And then when we're activated in this way, we find that the part of our brain that we really need to connect with our spouse or our children and to communicate effectively and to be empathetic to what's going on for them as well, that part of the brain is shut off. Yeah. It's hijacked because our emotional center is overriding that.
Yes.
And so the next step, I'd say, well, not the next step, but pretty much that goes in line with the importance of just walking away and taking time to take deep breath. Yeah, I always say to parents, if you're upset, if you're frustrated with the child and they did something and you need to, a lot of times we feel like we have to respond right away. But I always say to parents, sometimes we need a timeout. We need to just step back, give ourselves some time, calm down, then we re-engage with the child. Because when we do act out of anger, we end up doing and saying things that down the road we're either going to regret it
Regret.
so much, or we're going to spending a lot of time trying to
Right.
justify why our behavior was correct.
And just on that point, listen to this. Again, in Proverbs 21:23, whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble.
Mm.
So this is important. So again, we're talking about you experiencing the anger, you feeling the anger, but watch this mouth.
Mhm.
You're going to regulate yourself and careful of what proceeds of the mouth, because it says here, whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's what we do. We add trouble
Yeah.
to trouble,
Yeah.
and it becomes double trouble
Yes.
in the relationship. And as you mentioned there, one of the things that through the verses we have read here talks about what self-control, that's keeping the mouth and the tongue. That a lot of self-control going on here, right? And the Proverbs said, the man who controls himself, he's wise,
Mhm.
right? But the thing about it, think of again, we've talked about this before. We think about the human brain,
Yeah.
where we have the brain stem that you talked about, and fight, flight, or free system, the emotional system, the limbic system. But we have this prefrontal cortex, right? A part of the prefrontal cortex, you think the prefrontal cortex is divided in almost these kind of four fingers up here. My little finger is what we refer to as that orbital or the ventral prefrontal cortex, that kind of the ventral medial prefrontal cortex. And within this area, we have the orbital prefrontal cortex, which controls impulse.
Mhm.
Within this area, again, we have the orbital prefrontal cortex and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. They help to deal with impulse control. This is what happened now. When we fail to pay attention to the physiological sensation and that anger, and we get into that fight or flight system, the orbital prefrontal cortex goes offline.
Mhm.
So impulse control now goes offline.
Mhm.
And now we're going to say things that doesn't have any control. So we've lost self-control. So therefore, one of the key principles in anger management is learning to, this is how I teach it to a lot of my clients. I say they gotta learn to understand baby anger,
Mhm.
a toddler anger,
Mhm.
a child anger,
Mhm.
a kind of a preteen anger,
Mhm.
and getting to more of a teenage anger,
Mhm.
an adolescent anger, a young adult anger,
Yeah.
and a fully adult anger.
Yeah.
So anger moves in a sequence in our body. And if we
does.
learn to identify the baby one, that first annoyance, that's annoying.
Yeah.
Or my partner doing something that annoys me. If you catch that annoyance and you deal with that annoyance, and we refer to the annoyance as the baby anger, it won't transfer to a toddler anger where that annoyance is now up by about 10
because
to
you've
10
dealt
power.
with it.
You've dealt with it
right
down here,
there.
right down here.
Yeah.
Again, we have to be aware that we might learn based on the homes we grew up in.
Yes.
In moment a disagreement happened, there is shouting and there is loudness and there is this thing, and we move from, a lot of my clients will say, man, I don't even know if I go from baby to adult. I just know we move from 0 to 100 really quick.
Yes. Yes.
That's when you start to learn about yourself. We've got to learn about ourselves
Mhm.
if we're going to control that 0 to 100 really
Yes.
quickly. Self-management is akin to anger management.
Yes.
So when I think anger management, think self-management. Don't think of just the emotion
Mhm.
of anger. We get so caught up with this thing of the emotion. It's not a bad thing. What we need is self-control. So think of self-control when I think anger management.
So far you've mentioned two things that we can start doing if we're the ones who are struggling with it. First one is recognizing when we're up there
Mhm.
and take a step back, take our deep breath and calm down before we re-engage.
Yes.
The other thing you mentioned is that we need to practice self-awareness.
Yes.
We need to recognize, and what I teach kids, it pretty much the same thing, but we draw a picture, a thermometer.
Mhm.
So we have the anger thermometer, and it has different colors as well.
Mhm.
And we kind of identify what would the lower temperature be all the way
Yes.
up to the top. And then in each area, when I recognize I'm here, what can I do to reduce
Exactly.
that tension?
Same.
And so that seems like a simple technique, but it does work. And so for this person who is struggling with anger, like, oh my gosh, this is me and I just don't know how to deal with it, these are two simple strategies
Yes.
that we recommend that you start using.
And then if you want to, as I said, reach out to us. So we can
Yeah.
give you, in these videos, we do introduction to different
Yes.
things, right? So a lot of couples I work with, sometimes we have to spend some time with this anger piece, right? Anger, it's like one of the analogies I use also, Sana, is the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
What sink the Titanic? They see this iceberg.
Yeah.
And they looked at this iceberg, and what they could see,
Yeah.
their prediction is that what I can see
Mhm.
is the ice that's protruding out of the water,
Yeah. The tip.
the tip of the iceberg. And by that, they were confident we could go through that.
Mm-hmm.
But what they never recognized, I wasn't paying attention to, was what was beneath
Yes.
the iceberg. And what's beneath the iceberg
Mhm.
is much bigger
Yes.
and
3
more
times bigger.
dangerous
Yes.
than what's on top, the peak of the iceberg. So when it comes to anger, we have to figure out. So what people see is that anger, which is the peak
Yeah,
of the
the
iceberg.
behavior, the
Be-
yelling, the shouting,
Ah,
and all that stuff.
we have to figure out what's underneath that.
Yes.
And sometimes there's some deep things underneath. As I said, it's underwater. And those are the things that sink the ship.
Mhm.
There's some sink the relationship, sink the parent, their parenting skills. There's some deep things on. There's some resentment on there.
Yes.
There's some unforgiveness under there. There's some trauma under there.
Mhm.
There's some work, some things that was passed on to me, how to deal with conflicts under there. I grew up in a home where the anger and fighting was always there. That was passed on to me. That's underneath there.
Mhm.
There's some resentment, that some things that happened in the relationship that we haven't dealt with.
Yes.
That's under there.
Yeah.
So there's so much things under there.
Mhm.
And sometimes those things are coming up as this little thing, and we see the behavior and the
Yeah.
anger. Sometimes we need to go down there
That's
and
where we need to
address
go. That's where we
and
need to
address
go.
those
Yeah.
things. Yes.
Yeah, and I know like a lot of times we take on a behavioral change approach, which is good. It's okay. It's awesome. You have to have that approach, but we miss the root.
The root.
We miss the root cause. We miss what is really under the surface that is nurturing these because sometimes we're like, I'm changing my behavior, I'm trying to do differently, but I keep exploding.
Yes.
And I know, like I've heard a lot of parents say that I try to do better, I try to be more patient, but I find that I struggle. I explode towards my child, and I don't know why. So that's why I love, you talk about you use the iceberg analogy. That a lot of times what we're seeing on the tip is just a small portion of what is really there underneath. And in our programs, in our coaching programs, the first thing we generally touch on is us.
Yes.
So if an individual comes in and say, hey, we need to work on our parenting and how I can support my child, I need to learn behavioral strategies for my child. We're like, well, let's learn a little bit about you first, because a lot of times we can be perfect at some point in doing the behaviors, but then after a while, if we haven't healed internally, we find that we start having difficulties. And the resentment continues, and we get frustrated and disappointed with ourselves, and we struggle with the guilt.
And the problem, because with the thing with behaviors, right, you have to maintain them.
Yeah.
And the Bible is big on heart transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And there's some heart healing that needs to take place. And that's what God desires for us. God desires to heal the heart and the mind, so we can have a different manifestation of who we are, so we can live that newness, new man, new human in our relationship, new man, new woman, new person in your relationship. Anger doesn't need to cause anger, and its family members doesn't need to cause a rift in your marriage, because God can give you the power to overcome that anger. We just need to learn what's causing it and strategies to deal with it. Sometimes we get into this thing where we also want to defend ourselves. Sometimes take a step back.
Yeah.
The more defensive we are, is the more we allow the anger to grow.
To grow, of course.
Right? So we want to move away from defensiveness. We want to move into, how do I take responsibility? What part of this thing I can take responsibility for?
So we need to adopt a spirit of humility.
And that's going to be profound, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I recommend, if you struggle with anger, If you struggle with anger, find some Bible verses, 3, 4, email us for some. Well, find some Bible verses. And you want to build a 45 days healing program for your anger. And what you're going to do is that you're going to choose 3 Bible verses, or just choose some, but you're going to use 1 or 2 per day. You're going to start your morning in your morning meditation in that Bible verse, what it means to you, how it's connected to your anger. So you want to pick ones that are anger related. Either anger related means self-control, surrender, humility. All of these could be anger related Bible verses, right? And you want to meditate on that, what it means for you, how it's connected to your anger, your feelings, your thoughts, and your behaviors around this. You want to journal through this. I'm giving you a whole remedy right here. You journal through it with your thoughts, feelings, and what the Bible verses. You want to keep a song there in that process. And then you want to keep that same verse. When you do the meditation in the morning, you keep that verse in your mind until midday. And about midday, you want to spend about 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes, review what you went through in the morning, and then continue with that verse throughout the day. So right throughout the day, you're being mindful. You're doing something mindfully in regards to the anger. So if something trigger you that day, because you are doing your mindfulness practice through your scriptural meditation, you already have your protective gears right there. And if you practice it for 45 days, you will see that you'll have a change. So remember, people can always trigger, because they can do things that trigger. People don't make you angry. People don't make you do the things you do when you get angry.
I'm glad you say that, because a lot of times, but you see, you
You
made
made
me
it. No, no,
angry.
no, no.
Yes.
Yes, people can do things that trigger you the wrong way. You need to learn to develop control of the anger, right?
Yeah.
You need to learn to develop that control of the anger. So if somebody does something, you can say, here it is. I'm being triggered right now. You want to, but you want to meditate through that. What could be my response right here? 45 days of doing this practice, and at least, and almost at least 45 days of doing this practice, and then you start to see changes. Because now you've been mindfully regulating yourself, specifically relating to anger for 45 days. And at the end of these 45 days, these are plans I write out for people all the time.
Yeah. And it's also covered in your book, your new book.
Yes.
As well.
So if you go there, you can always read it there, or you can reach out to us, and I'm willing to teach these things to people indeed, to write them out for them in our program. These are details we get into to help people because it's an important emotion.
It's important. It's important. Anger is just one of them. One of the emotions that we talk about. As it relates to nurturing healthy couples relationship and parent-child relationship. So reach out to us, let us know, or just comment below, let us know that you're interested in receiving that complimentary guide or step-by-step guide. Just a short reader, but it's very practical and very effective. Just comment and let us know you'd like a copy, and we'll reach out to you and we'll try and get it to you right away. All right. So yeah, well, that's it for now, guys. Until next week, we hope that you have a very, very blessed week. And if you have any follow-up questions, we are more than happy to address them in our following sessions. So for those who joined us, thank you for taking the time out. Until next time, this is Sani and Dr. Dookie saying
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.